some things are not easily factored. Some things are not easily factored. In fact, they're almost impossible to factor. So we have to have a backup plan. Now, for some of you, you might remember the phrase completing the square. That, we're not going to use that particular technique right now. Okay? We're also not going to graph. We're going to use a different plan. From the process of completing the square, there is something called the quadratic formula. Now, when I was at school, they made me factor. I got pretty good at it. And then they made me complete the square. I got good at that too. And then they said, oh, by the way, you can use a quadratic formula and sidestep all of that. Then I was mad. Because I realized, hey, you had a formula this whole time in your back pocket, and you didn't let me in on that little secret. But I learned a lot about how all this stuff fits together. Now, quite honestly, I think we're going to focus on factoring, graphing, and the quadratic formula. Okay, I think we're going to sidestep the completing the square process because it can get kind of ugly. Now, the quadratic formula has a few parts, and one of them has a name. It's called the discriminant. It's okay. You need to know and have written down that this discriminant looks like this, b squared minus 4ac. It is a part of the quadratic formula, and it's an important part. And yes, a is still in front of the squared term, and b is still in front of the linear term x, and c is still the constant term. So our a, b, and c in this case are 2, 4, and 2. Now, in the bigger version of the quadratic formula that we're eventually going to get to, this thing that you're seeing in front of you sits under a square root. Consequently, it's important whether we know this thing is positive, 0, or negative. Those are the three situations we could have for this particular value. Positive, 0, or negative. You'd be writing this down. If it's positive, then we have these type of parabolas. How many times do these parabolas cross the x-axis? How many times do these parabolas cross the x-axis? Twice. Right? So we say 2 real solutions. I'll abbreviate solutions, SOL. It's probably not a good abbreviation. But we're going to do it anyway. How in the world is this the first day that I ever looked at that and said to myself, wow, that's not bad way to say that, but okay. How many times have you used that? Oh, years. Okay? Alright? Wow. Yeah. Solution, it's the abbreviation. Yeah. Okay. Glad I recorded that. Okay, now. Okay, now. If the discriminant is 0, okay? If the discriminant is 0, then the situation, you know what, I'm going to circle this just so you keep it separate. Well, I just want to keep it separate so that people don't get it confused. Okay? In the situation where you have a discriminant which is 0, your parabolas do things like this. Just like the song that Katy Perry sung. I kissed the x-axis and I liked it. Okay, that's, if you look back at the words of this song, you will understand she's talking about parabolas that touch the x-axis one spot. Okay? In other words, that's one real SOL. Solution. What do you think is the last situation that could occur if we have one situation where it crosses twice, one situation where it crosses once? It doesn't touch at all. We could have parabolas that miss the x-axis completely. And that happens when you have a negative, right? If you want to write the word negative in there, that's fine, but it's a negative discriminant versus a positive or a zero discriminant. This is no real solutions. No real SOL. Okay? As far as solutions are concerned, you are SOL. Alright. Alright, folks. Time to figure out what we got going on here. B squared minus 4 times A times C. B squared minus 4AC. I need you to calculate it for me and tell me which category we're in. Mr. Rose says 0. What do you think? I don't know. I need to find out if somebody else agrees or disagrees with that. Okay, yeah, 16 take away 16. That is definitely 0. What does that mean? One real solution. When the discriminant is 0, you must understand we have one real, it's when it's touching. If you want me to prove it to you, I will. Y equals, let's get rid of this. Y equals 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. Look, it touches in one spot. Right there at -1 is where in that one particular one touched. Okay? Now, the entire quadratic formula. I'm going to write the entire quadratic formula out, but I need you to understand, when we actually use it, I want you to do it in 2 steps. Because if you do it in 2 steps, I have a feeling you'll get it right. If you try to do it all at the same time, you might hurt yourself. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yep. I know. I got it tattooed. I got it tattooed on my lower back, but that was a wild party right there.
Me too, actually.
No.
Wow.
It's a complete lie. I'm too scared for tattoos. I couldn't do it. It would hurt too much. Yeah. Oh my goodness! Exactly. That's why my shirt's always tucked in. All right, now let's talk about this in 2 steps. Step number 1 is find the discriminant. Okay, that's my first step. Okay, so when you're doing this, practically speaking, you're actually going to find the discriminant first. Step number 2 is to do the rest of the quadratic formula. Now, where is this value that you found in step number 1 going to go inside my step number 2? It's going to go under the radical. So we're going to find the part that's under the radical first, and then we're going to plug it into the rest. It's much more manageable if you do it in 2 steps than if you try to do this all at one time. Alright, so let's do this. Step number 1, b squared, which would be, negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. So that's step number 1. It's a part of my discriminant, right? This part under the radical has the 4 in it automatically. Oh, yes. Well, thank you for quizzing me. Okay. Find me the discriminant. I need to know what that number is. Last question for today. I mean, once we get through the whole thing. What'd you get? 4. That is correct. Okay, now which situation are we in? Which situation are we dealing with if we got a positive 4 for the discriminant? 2 real solutions. We know this crosses the x-axis twice. We will be getting 2 answers. Okay? So step number 2. The opposite of negative 6, right? Because that's the opposite of b. Plus or minus the square root of what number? 4. All over 2 times 1. Now, do we know the opposite of negative 6? Positive 6. Do we know the square root of 4? 2. And 2 times 1 on the bottom is 2. So, we literally need to find 6 plus 2 over 2 and 6 minus 2 over 2. Those are the 2 things we need to calculate. One of the answers is 4. That is true. The other one is 2. That is true. 4 and 2. Does it matter which order I put the answers in? And we can confirm what you just said. X squared minus 6x plus 8. Oh, look, it goes right through 2 and 4. Okay, so if we do this quadratic formula in 2 steps, we'll more than likely get the correct answer. We will be practicing a lot tomorrow.